Brothers and sisters, I want to share with you today an unbelievable miracle that I think captures and reveals the power of Christ, his resurrection power, the power of the sacraments. Maybe this miracle outwardly would show to us maybe what really happens when we receive grace, for example, in confession, when we're restored to life, when our soul has been deadened by mortal sin, or when we have cut ourselves off from the life of God, and the power of the sacrament to restore us to life, to awaken and to renew the life of God in us, for example. Or just the grace of baptism that has transformed our soul and delivered us into the hands of God himself and united us to God. And so this miracle, I should preface it first of all by sharing just a few things. That there's something that we've spoken about before, but it's to do with poverty of spirit. It's to do with really becoming so hungry and dependent on God, where God is first, where God is not an idol, but where things of this earth are not idols, but God is first, and that he's absolute, and we're in need, we're in touch with our need for God. And often God allows certain great failures in our life. We see this very clearly in some saints who lived all sorts of lives. And for example, Saint Augustine, and the Lord humbled him through his own weakness to reach out to God, and for God's great pure love and his sanctifying power. And I say this because all of us on our journey, in some ways, we could feel unworthy of God in some way. We could feel far from God. We could feel that what does God have to do with me? How interested can God be in me and my life when I clearly fail all the norms that I set out to fulfill in my Christian duties, or my love for him, or whatever. If it's some kind of a crisis you might be going through in your life, or some addiction, or something in your life that is holding you back from surrendering more to the Lord. And it's good to remember that through all of this, God can be really getting you to get into what I call your heart cry, into that real prayer of the heart, and not some kind of superficial, really kind of fake prayer maybe sometimes that we could pray. We're not really praying with our heart and with fervor and hunger for God, or with conviction or real need or desperation for God. And sometimes we see some of the greatest miracles happen when desperation in the spiritual life meets the life of prayer and reaches out to God, and God then can really enter the heart. So it's not that God is like some unmoved, unaffectionate, unemotional. The heart of Christ is not like stoic to us. So it's not that he has to wait for us to be desperate, but it's good for us to be desperate. It's good for us because in desperation, our heart is open, our barriers are down. We're no longer, we're not hardened in our heart towards God, we could say, but we're truly in a place where we could cry out to him, that we could really call out for him a great desire in that desperation. And that desire and that desperation really creates room in our heart, you could say, for God's grace and for his life. So coming back to this miracle I was talking about from the beginning, it's that I've been reading, I've heard about this many times before, obviously in the lives of the saints, and we see it in many ways through the sacrament of the sick. And that's to do with sometimes when people have died, and through the power of Christ, they're raised back to life, or they come back to life. And but in this particular account, is a true story of a man in Mozambique, and there are many stories of this through Iris Global, which is a great missionary charity organization led by a lady called Heidi Baker and Roland Baker, and they have seen incredible miracles and wonders. Especially in this area where children have died, where people have died even for up to a day, and even their bodies started to smell. And in particular, this one guy, I was reading his testimony where he died and he went to the Lord. He saw the Lord, he went to the afterlife, and the Lord said it wasn't his time. And even at that point, he was dead for a day and his body was decaying and was smelling. And even when the Lord sent him back to his body because of the prayer of this pastor praying over him, calling him back to life, believing in the power of the risen Jesus, that when he came back into his body, he said he even smelled the stench of his own body's decay, which is crazy. But these people have absolutely nothing. They have no access to hospital systems. They have nothing but God. And often in these situations, Heidi and Roland, who are still alive and run this great ministry, they've seen incredible miracles. The way the Lord, his resurrection power, has restored that person back to death. But think about what only the Creator could do that. And I think of stories in the gospel like the man born blind who was in the temple and Jesus restored his sight. And people said, only God could do this. Who could do such a miracle? And the same thing, the disciples of Jesus. I think of St. Dominic himself, who raised more than one person back from the dead. And St. Vincent Ferrer, another great Dominican saint, who rose many people back from the dead. And so this is an amazing witness outwardly to what God does to us in the sacraments.